as a landing thing.
Okay, here we go.
Perfect. Okay, webinar is live.
There it is. Oh, yay. Oh, it looks like people were able to find us despite the wonky time change on our end, right?
Yes, I didn't really realize. I woke up and was like, oh my gosh.
I know, right?
We're an hour
I
behind.
realized, yeah, exactly. I was, we're telling people that it's 7 o'clock Central Time, but I forgot that we were going on the on our change time thing too. Oh, my dad is on here, and my cousin Christine.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's fabulous.
Hi, Dad, coming from Virginia, and Christine from Washington.
You can't get any farther away. That's
yeah, right.
Farther from each other than they are from us.
And everybody, as we're waiting for everybody to come in, if you want to just tell us where you're joining us from in the chat box, we'd love to hear that. Thank you so much for joining our Language Adventure Pros. Welcome. My name is Rebecca Eichler, and together with my partner Ginger Bamdoni, we're co-founders of Language Adventure Pros, offering curated language and educational programs in San Miguel. During the pandemic, we have pivoted to providing online webinars of interesting and educational things that we think are pretty cool. And we've had a really great series that included mezcal course, local winery course. What else have we had? We've had history of San Miguel and Vail. We're super excited to have Vail Smerlinder de Suarez here with us on our last, for now, webinar. Vail is a 22-year resident, has lived in San Miguel de Allende for 22 years. She is a licensed tour guide and an English teacher here in town, and an award-winning storyteller. I love storytelling. And if you missed her, this is the second of a two-part series that she's done. All of our previous webinars are available on our website at languageadventurepros.com. Go under the webinars tab, you can see the previous recordings. You can donate for this webinar today. During the pandemic, everybody in the tourism industry around the world, obviously, and especially in our small town here of San Miguel, where so many people rely on tourism, everybody's been very severely impacted. So any donations that you can give to show Vail your appreciation for her knowledge and her wonderful storytelling this evening will be greatly appreciated. Let's see, we have a couple of chats here. Let's see, we've got people from Ontario, north of Toronto on the shores of Georgia Bay. Wow. Krista Marie is there. There's a question, will we be sending a follow-up email to registrants with the link to our website? And we are going to be posting the link in the website in the chat button. Yep, there we go. Ginger just put it up there. And likewise, during the presentation that Vail's going to be giving tonight, if you have any questions, please post it in the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen or in the chat window. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Vail. Welcome. We're so happy to have you, Vail, and thank you. I'll leave it to you now.
Well, thank you so much. It's wonderful. We've got people from all over North America. So let me please, I'll start by sharing the screen. So welcome everybody to the Dia de Muertos, Day of the Dead webinar. We are talking about awesome ancestors and amazing altars. So let me, one moment. Let me just go to the first page. I'm a teacher with 17 years experience. As Rebecca mentioned, I'm a federally accredited tour guide in Mexico, an award-winning storyteller, and I hope tonight to educate you, but also to entertain you. So many people think that Day of the Dead is a Mexican Halloween. Day of the Dead is not a Mexican Halloween. We will start the talk tonight by seeing how these holidays are different and if they have any similarities. So of course, the very first thing, starting out, the dates of the celebration are different. Halloween is celebrated on just one day, October 31st. Of course, being 2020, this year, Halloween is on a Saturday. It would have been perfect for an epic Halloween party, but being coronavirus times, it will not happen. Day of the Dead is celebrated on 2 days, November 1st and November 2nd. So the origins of these celebrations are also different. So we can see on this Google map, yes, we've got the origins of Halloween coming from Europe. And of course, the Day of the Dead origins are from the Americas before the Spanish arrived. So Halloween's origins date back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. Well, the Celts were living in mostly Ireland, but other parts of the United Kingdom 2,000 years ago. The Day of the Dead celebrations had already been going on for about 1,000 years. So here we can see a map, the Day of the Dead, like I said, pre-Hispanic tradition, celebrated in the Americas for over 3,000 years. Still today, many parts of Central and going down into South America have Day of the Dead celebrations still today. So we, of course, are going to be talking about Mexico because it's my home. So how do we celebrate these holidays? Halloween versus Day of the Dead. So, well, Halloween is a chance to dress up, to have some fun scaring people and getting scared. Day of the Dead has nothing to do with being scared. Day of the Dead is about remembering and celebrating our dead family members and friends. So here you can see they're hanging out. Here it looks like they're in the cemetery. If you have family in the cemetery, of course, you would visit them there. If you don't have family in your local cemetery, of course, you can do your altars in your home. Later on, we will see how to make your own altar. So, of course, people celebrate Halloween by wearing costumes. Children go trick-or-treating, except, of course, for this year. Adults attend parties, and we like to scare ourselves. We go into haunted houses on purpose to scare ourselves silly. On Day of the Dead, people build altars with memorabilia for their dead loved ones. They often visit with family members. They go to the grave sites. Here you can see the two women who are here probably camped out for the entire night. This would be the night of November 1st to November 2nd, and often November 2nd to the 3rd. So if people wear costumes for Day of the Dead, it is almost always 100% these elegant skeleton costumes. So the men are called quatrines, Often they would have a top hat, kind of early 1900s style. The men have it a bit easier. They just need a tuxedo. Women are Katrinas, and they often have, besides the flower crown, huge hats, often with ostrich feathers, and much more elaborate dresses. Sometimes the entire family dresses up either to go downtown to walk around and show off their paint job, or to visit the cemetery or families' homes to check out their altars. These Katrinas were inspired by the etchings of the artist Jose Guadalupe Posada. This is his most famous etching, and it is actually the Katrina. And you can see what I was talking about, the big fancy hat with often feather boas and ostrich feathers. Jose Guadalupe Posada did a lot of political caricatures, which often got him into trouble, but he was published in many national newspapers. Here's an etching he did of himself with his most famous drawing, the Katrina. The artist had created many etchings of people in the working class skeletons. Often he depicted, like you can see, people on their horses, often with their dogs, sometimes in the fields, or here dancing. But one day he had this epiphany that he said, no one escapes death, not even the rich, not the famous. And that is when he came up with this series of very elegant skeletons. You can see the man with his top hat and the woman, very much the early 1900s, almost Victorian style. The famous Mexican muralist Diego Rivera, now known as Frida Kahlo's husband, although of course when they were alive, the tables were turned. Frida was known as Diego's wife who dabbled in art. Now, when I give tours, I have people say, who's Diego Rivera? But they all know Frida. So Diego Rivera put a Katrina front and center in his very most famous mural in 1947. And he brought the Katrina back to popular Mexican culture, where it has stayed ever since. From t-shirts to coffee cups to actual Barbie dolls painted as Katrinas, you can find Katrina objects anywhere, everywhere you go in Mexico and abroad. What are the iconic symbols of the holiday? Well, for Halloween, of course, we have jack-o'-lanterns, witches, and black cats. The sugar skull is definitely the most iconic symbol of the Day of the Dead. You can see they come in all sizes, from itty-bitty mini to very large, life-size, and beyond. What colors are associated with the holidays? So of course, we all know black and orange are the colors of Halloween. Well, orange and purple are very popular colors for Day of the Dead. Although you can find every single color of the rainbow in the altars around town or on the internet. So we are not limited to just two. Often the colors you use on the altars would reflect the favorite colors of your deceased loved ones that you are honoring. So here, what foods do we eat on these holidays? So at the top, you can see very traditional Mexican candies. Well, on the bottom, you would see the more traditional Halloween candies from the United States. Originally, apples were a popular treat on Halloween. Of course, when we were growing up, the people who gave apples for Halloween, we just skipped that house. Now, people are giving away all sorts of candies, and it is being eaten by not only the children, but also the parents of the trick-or-treaters. There are many sweets around Day of the Dead, but like I mentioned, they are traditional Mexican candies, and they tend to be made out of fruits, nuts, honey, and often the candies include chili. So kind of like the sweet and sour, but this would be the sweet and the spicy combination. But the most iconic food for Day of the Dead would be the Day of the Dead bread. People will put the bread on their altars, but also we eat this bread as a seasonal treat with our coffee in the morning and often with a hot chocolate at night. This is one of these special seasonal treats. So you can buy bread, even if you're in the US, you can go to your nearest Mexican grocery store or Mexican bakery. If that is not an option, or if you like to bake, you can make your own Day of the Dead bread quite easily. Here I've put up the recipe, but it's also in the printable that you have the link to print later on. So basically, a very simple bread recipe. What's a bit different, of course, would be the bit of the orange flavor that it has and the final touches, which really make it Day of the Dead bread. So here you can see you roll out little round circles. They almost look like they could be cookies. Of course, you need to let them rise a bit. Then you are going to make some thin strips, which you can see in the middle, the hand moving there. That is going to be what will represent the bones, and the little circle, which would represent the skull. So here, very, very typical. Before it's baked, at the top on the right, down on the bottom, getting ready to be baked, and of course, the final product on the bottom right-hand side. So like I said, this recipe is in the printables that you have the link for, and you can look up on this website, mexicoinmykitchen.com, Pan de Muerto, Mexican bread of the dead. Very good. So that was the most typical shape, but loaves of these breads can come in any shape, even in the shapes of human beings, crosses, skulls, and animals. Your imagination is the only limit to the shapes the Day of the Dead bread can come in. There are also many favorite foods on the altars, but these foods are not for the living. These foods are for the dead when they come back to spend time with their family members and enjoy their very favorite foods just once a year. It is said that the dead suck up all the flavor or the essence of the food, leaving it flavorless the next day. So, what differences are there between the two holidays? Many differences. We do have some similarities also. So, in the printables, I've got for children or adults, the Venn diagram of how they are different, how they are this, and how they are the same in the middle purple part. So you can reflect on this later on. We're now moving on to what are the origins of Day of the Dead. So the Toltecs and the Aztecs had a festival dedicated to the goddess of death, Mictecacihuatl. And we can see her picture here on the left. It tells us that Mictecacihuatl was sacrificed as a baby, but she magically grew to adulthood in the underworld, and eventually she got in this picture. She's no longer a baby. This represents her growing to adulthood in the underworld. So this goddess and her husband collected the bones so that they might be returned to the land of the living by the gods. They have never gotten their way. There they have been for thousands and thousands of years, and no signs of them returning to the living anytime soon, although if they were coming back, 2020 would be the year they would make an appearance. So the Aztecs appeased these fearsome underworld gods by burying their dead under their houses, often in the kitchens. They buried their dead with food and precious objects, such as jade and figurines of dogs. So here we have a picture of a Xoloscuincle. These are hairless Mexican dogs. They are rather new to the American Breeding Association, but they have been around in Central, South America, and Mexico for at least 4,000 years. Some people say closer to 7,000 years. So you can see hairless, although they do have a little tuft of hair often on the top of their head. These dogs were used to keep your beds warm at night. So we get the expression a 1 dog night, 2 dog night, 3 dog night from these dogs. These dogs were created by Xooltol, the god of lightning and death, from a piece of the bone of life. And as you can see in the picture, this god very much looks like the dogs that he created. These dogs were created to accompany and guard humans during their lives. So here's a little brown Xoloscuincle. They can be black, they can be brown. They often have white spots And it is believed that every white spot represents a soul that this dog has brought over to the other side, because their main job on this earth was to help humans find their way to Mictlan, or the underworld, after they had passed. There were 8 levels of underworld that had to be passed to reach the 9th level and the final resting place. So like one last video game before your final resting spot. The deceased were greeted by a mighty river. Here we can see it's Cuitlan. And of course, we have the river and we have the dog. The only way to cross this river was paying the goddess a piece of jade, and with the help of the Cholo Squinkle dog. So here we can see the dog navigating the river for the human. If the deceased had not been kind to dogs in their lives, they were destined to remain stuck in this dimension for all eternity. The next place was where the mountains collided with each other, Tepetl Monamitan. Then they passed through the Hill of Knives, a mountain made of sharp flints. Next was the place where the wind blows knives. The deceased had to cross 8 hills through cutting winds and snowstorms. Temimata Oilan, more or less. Next, they crossed a large frozen desert area where the wind blew through their bodies like flags. Then they followed a steep, narrow path over a mountain through a never-ending blizzard. Next, a wild beast opened the chest of the deceased to eat their heart. They were dead, so, they weren't using it anyhow. Then the deceased had to wade through 9 rivers, through fog that blinded them. After overcoming all of these obstacles, their tetonali, or their souls, finally got to rest in Mictlan. If you have seen the movie Coco, which I highly recommend for children and adults, Mictlan is the city of the dead, where they finally can rest. It was said that this journey took 4 years to complete. After the long journey, the dead could return to visit their families, but only once a year, on the Day of the Dead. The living held a month-long celebration for the goddess of death around the end of July, which involved burning incense, songs, and dances, altars or offerings, ofrendas, for the dead, and way back when, blood sacrifices of animals, and even humans. It was an honor for a family member to be chosen for a sacrifice. I would prefer to not be honored. They, of course, made these sacrifices to keep the gods of death, the rulers of the underworld, happy. The Spanish, arriving in 19 were the invaders of Mexico and most of Central and South America. They were, of course, very Catholic, and they worked hard to evangelize the native people. To stamp out lingering indigenous beliefs, they demolished religious temples, burned indigenous idols, and destroyed Aztec books. But the indigenous people in Mexico and across the Americas resisted the Spanish efforts to eradicate their culture. Instead, they often blended their own religious and cultural practices with those imposed on them by the Spanish. Spanish conquerors faced difficulties, convincing the native people to give up their rituals honoring the death goddess Mixtecacihuatl. The compromise was to move these indigenous festivities from late July to early November to correspond with the Christian All Hallow Tides, the 3-day Christian observance of All Saints' Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day. Some indigenous cultures had a Day of the Dead to celebrate each kind of death that a person had experienced. For example, there was a day to honor women who had died in childbirth, a day for people who died in fires, and a day for people who drowned, and etc., etc. In an entire month, so about 30 different deaths that could be suffered. Nowadays, the Day of the Dead is celebrated on November 1st and 2nd. November 1st is known as the Day of the Angelitos, or the little angels, and it is the day we celebrate deceased babies and young children. November 2nd is the day that people honor their ancestors, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, and so on. It is believed that as long as someone still remembers you or knows about your life, that you are not really dead, because you can return to the land of the living to visit your family once a year. Many Mexican families visit their families' graves and decorate them with flowers, candles, paper cutouts, and sugar skulls. Often families spend the whole day there, eating, listening to music, and of course, telling stories about their deceased family and friends. Some families even spend the night there. This is not a scary time, as the souls that are returning are the souls of your beloved family members and friends. Many families make ofrendas or offerings in their homes. Sometimes ofrendas are made to honor famous people who have passed away. This is one I made dedicated to Prince when he passed away in 2006. Being a Minnesotan, no matter how long I've lived in Mexico, we all love Prince. Everything, of course, as you can see, was the color purple. Some cities have altars and or ofrendas set up in the city. This is the city that I live in, San Miguel de Allende, right in front of our main church. In Spanish, the word altar actually refers to an altar is an offering for a saint, not a family member. So unless you are making one specifically for a saint, in Spanish, altar is not the correct word, although in English, really, an offering, it doesn't have the same meaning or impact as altar has in English. So in English, it's okay to use altar, while in Spanish, it's definitely better to use the word ofrenda, offering. An ofrenda, as I said, is an offering used to honor a family member or a friend, or even a pet. You can make your own ofrenda in your house. We have plenty of time. We have an entire week to get organized and to put up our altars. So first of all, you need to think, are you going to make a simple altar, or will it be very elaborate? Some ofrendas are simple with just 2 levels, one representing the earth and one representing the heavens or the underworld, however you would like to interpret it. Some ofrendas have 3 levels that often represent earth, the heavens, and the skies or the underworld. Very good. Or here, actually, sorry, earth, purgatory, and heaven. Definitely more of the Catholic touch there. Some ofrendas have 7 levels, again, with the more Catholic idea of each level represents a step that it takes the deceased to reach heaven. I know they don't have anything quite as hard as getting to Mictlan, the 8 levels to reach the 9th level and final resting place in indigenous beliefs. Some people even make ofrendas with 9 levels to represent the 9 levels of the underworld. You can use a stairway to create these levels, probably the easiest way. You can use tables and boxes to create the levels. They don't need to be fancy because you can cover them with fabric or tissue paper. Often the first level of the altar is on the floor and made with colored sawdust, sand, or sometimes food such as beans and corn, and very often flower petals, especially the marigold's petals. Now you need to think about who you are going to honor. Will you honor just one person? Or will you have a number of deceased loved ones on your ofrenda? Now it's time to think about what color your loved one liked and what other things were their favorite. So starting with what color was their favorite, you can use this color when you pick the Papel Picado or the paper cutouts, which represent an element of air on the altar. You can buy Papel Picado at the Day of the Dead market in any city in Mexico, or you can make your own Papel Picado. Just fold a piece of tissue paper in half, draw half a design or use a mold to help you, draw the design onto the tissue paper, and then carefully cut out the design with either a cutter or scissors. When you have finished cutting out your design, unfold the tissue paper and add it to your ofrenda. You can use the templates that you can find in the activity book that we have the link to in the chat, or your own designs. You may buy sugar skulls also in your deceased loved one's favorite color. And the traditional sugar sheep, pigs, and chickens which represent abundance. And you can get also the same color scheme for the sugar figurines. You will need to buy or make sugar or clay figurines for your altar. What was your loved one's favorite food and drink? Here, this altar was made by us for my father-in-law, and we were lucky enough to find pizza and beer sugar figurines, a hamburger, enchiladas, jicama. We've got some esquite, which is the corn with chili and cheese. So if you can't find it, you'll have to make it on your own. So again, thinking about your loved ones, what was their favorite pastime? What did they like to do? Did they drink coffee? Did they drink beer? Did they play an instrument? Did they dance? Alceniques is the Spanish word for the figurines made out of sugar. And as I said, you can easily make your own. The recipe is very, very simple. 4 cups powdered sugar, 1 egg white, lime from 1 lime, and food coloring. These are often, if they fall and break, the kids will, oh, I've got to eat it now. It does have egg white, but the lime in the recipe will cook the egg white, a chemical cook, much like a ceviche is cooked by the lime juice. So it is okay for you to eat these sugar figurines. First, we'll mix the powdered sugar with the egg white and the lime juice. Mix with your hands until it reaches a Play-Doh consistency. Divide the dough into 5 or 6 sections. Add a different food coloring to each section and knead it into dough. Again, this recipe comes in the printable book. So you're ready to create any figure that reminds you of your loved ones. Here there's a camera we can see. On the other side, we have skeletons playing cards, skeletons doing all sorts of activities. Let them dry overnight and they will be ready to put on your altar the next day. So here they did a whole little altar in sugar figurines, the sugar skull, the paper, the Day of the Dead bread. They've got some water, they've got the incense, the candles. So as I was saying, the children do eat the alceniques, and they are safe to eat. They're very breakable, so it is always good to get a few extras in case they break. And if you have children in the house, they will be eaten very quickly. Here I love, we've got some tacos, we've got some enchiladas, a fried egg and beans, sweet bread, mole with rice, all sorts of favorite foods. Most families do not save sugar figurines from one year to the next. Instead, they buy or make new ones each year. What else do you need for your ofrenda? You need the orange marigold flowers called cempasúchil in Nahuatl, the indigenous language of the Aztecs. This means the flower of 1,000 petals. These flowers, sweet smells, is believed to awaken the dead, and their bright colors guide them to the ofrendas. The magenta-colored amaranth flowers are also commonly put on the altars. Outdoor flower markets are set up in front of the covered markets all over Mexico to buy the flowers for the altars or ofrendas. The marigolds can be left on their stems. They can be put in vases. The flowers can be cut off and laid on the altar, or the petals can be removed and sprinkled over the altars. We talked about the element of air being represented by the Papel Picados, or the paper cutouts. What other elements are represented? Of course, fire. Fire is represented with candles. Like the flowers, they help to guide the deceased to the ofrendas. Cups of water are placed on the ofrenda, not only to represent the water, but also to quench the thirst of the deceased after their long voyage to the land of the living. The element of earth is represented by sugar figurines or real pieces of fruits and vegetables. Real dishes of food are also placed on the ofrenda, such as mole with chicken and rice, enchiladas, or any other favorite dish of the deceased. No ofrenda is complete without a few pieces of Day of the Dead bread. Salt and copal incense are placed on the altar to purify the ofrenda and keep bad spirits away. Copal is the most common incense used for Day of the Dead. It is burned in large ceramic incense burners, and its smell evokes the memory of this holiday whenever you smell it, along with the marigolds. Many families add a cross somewhere on the ofrenda. Originally, this represented the 4 directions. Now, of course, it's a sign of the Catholicism in Mexico. A favorite religious saint, such as the Virgin of Guadalupe, is often added to the ofrenda. Skeleton figurines made out of paper mache or elegant skeleton statues made out of clay can also be included. So here we've got a Katrine and a Katrina. On the other side also a Katrine, a Katrina, and even a nun there. And of course, you must display a photograph of your loved ones. Personal objects of the dead are added to the ofrendas. Hats, guitars, cameras, children's toys, and any other belongings can be left on the ofrendas. What are calaveritas literarias? So these are special poems written around Day of the Dead. They are rhyming mock obituaries that poke fun at living politicians or prominent citizens, but they can also be written about one's friends and loved ones. So the one that I have here is for Mexico's current president, which people are mixed reviews. The last line here says, "You say your administration can do anything, but go talk with death about it while we wait." So here I've got one in English to share for another quite famous politician. So here I will share. Lady Death was dressed up to kill. As she set off on the campaign stump, she emerged from the crowd at a Florida rally to put her grip on Donald J. Trump. Checking out her slim figure with a gleam in his eye, he beckoned, "Come, honey, I'll give you a kiss." Wagging a bony finger at the pertinent guy, she moved in close and replied with a hiss, "I know you have fame and plenty of wealth, but you best keep your hands to yourself." So perfect example of a literary skull. These poems are often done in school, and they are accompanied by drawings of skeletons or skulls. So how can you draw a sugar skull? Here we've got the 10 steps, also, of course, in the printables that you can download. So step by step makes it easy. You can decorate your sugar skull in any design you would like, and of course, using your favorite colors. You can add your Calaverita Literaria poem next to your drawing of your sugar skull and add it to your ofrenda. Now that you can draw a sugar skull, you can also do face paint. For a Katrine or a Katrina, you can paint your own face or your family and friends' faces also. You can do simple or you can do elaborate. If you are a Katrina, flower crowns and fancy hats are common, while Katrines usually have top hats or other headwear. Now, you know everything you need to know to celebrate Day of the Dead. You can make your sugar figurines and your paper cutouts. You can bake your Day of the Dead bread. You can write your poems. You can draw a skull, paint your face, and make your own ofrenda. So enjoy this Day of the Dead. And I will shamelessly plug myself and my businesses. Clases Campana offers English, Spanish class, online, in-person, cultural webinars. Bell Tours offers walking tours, driving tours, customized tours anywhere in Mexico. And then the Taste of San Miguel, we have 7 tour guides. We're starting tours out of town and also in-house experiences. And please join me for another experience. And thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Vail, I think we have some questions.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, thanks, Vail. First of all, thanks, Vail, so much. That was fantastic, super informative, and I really enjoy your ability to bring it all together. We had a question related to death that happens near to Day of the Dead. You mentioned that there's the process that might take 4 years to go through the 9 different levels. Is it appropriate to construct an altar for somebody who has died very close to Day of the Dead before those 4 years are up?
Many people will say if it's just months prior to Day of the Dead, you should give them until the next year. I think the idea of 4 years has gone by the wayside. But, you know, oftentimes, for example, my father-in-law died in September. We did put him on our altar, but it was more, I think, comforting for us. He was also an American, but I think the fear is that you will bring them back and then they will have to start the terrible journey all over again. So I still know many families who, if it's, 3 months or less before Day of the Dead, when a person passes, they will often wait until the next year. Excellent question.
And related to that one, is it appropriate to do, well, I guess you did the Prince altar. So if the question was more, is it appropriate to do an altar for somebody that you're not related to?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. This is not only family, but also friends. And usually, anytime a major celebrity or politician, author, actor dies, there will be huge altars set up, often in the city they were from, but often also added in personal offerings or ofrendas in homes. So you don't even need to know the dead person to honor them. But definitely friends and family. Excellent question.
And what about, are there any specific grieving or mourning rituals right around the time when somebody dies? Any specific Mexican mourning rituals that people should be aware of if they're
in Mexico, we have 24 hours to be buried. So if you listen to the local radio station in the morning, they start out every morning with the national anthem, and then they go through a list of everyone who has died in the last 24 hours, because it's very traditional. You know, San Miguel at least is a small town. We have no refrigerated morgues. And so they need to be buried within 24 hours. So they put on the radio who has died, what time and what church the service will be in. And usually that night, they will be with the dead person in the church or in the home, wherever they're going to have the memorial. And often family, both immediate and extended family, will spend the night. Of course, the children may sleep, the adults may be praying, doing the rosary. But yes, traditionally, you would be buried within 24 hours and spend your last night on earth surrounded by loved ones, sharing this last time with you. And there's also a procession often before, if you are being buried at a graveyard, where people will have the hearse and they will follow all the way to the graveyard. Oftentimes when they are older people, they can be accompanied with even lively music. You'll see people taking pictures, even in our town, the locals, the people dressed up in costumes, and you will think it's a parade of some sort, and then the hearse comes behind. That would probably be more for, you know, a life that was long and prosperous versus a sudden death, or of course of a younger person. Also an excellent question.
So how would you mourn the sudden death of a young person, for example? Is there anything to do right immediately? Is bringing food, flowers, all the things that we're used to in the US, would that be also applicable to
Exactly, yes, food, flowers, but of course, you know, it's much more difficult to celebrate a short life. So of course, a lot more tears and crying and yelling and, you know, the unfairness of the death, where really, if you've lived a long, happy life, you know, you're being such a Catholic country, hooray, you're going to heaven.
We have a question from Christine Love. Is the Catholic influence very strong, or are there still many who are still connected with their older cultural traditions when it comes to Day of the Dead?
Well, my mother-in-law, who of course is Mexican, has said many times, if you are Mexican, you are Catholic, even if you are Jewish or Buddhist or atheist. There's really no getting around it. I mean, public schools do Christmas pageants. Public schools, and we do have separation of state and church, but definitely, even if you have been able to hold on to some of the indigenous rituals, that Catholicism is, you know, prevalent. Everybody, especially more in the ranches, they have the third birthday party welcoming the children as an official member of the church, the baptism, of course, the communion and everything. You know, even if you don't go to church, in some way, I think Catholicism is totally ingrained, even in atheists. In some way, it is drenched into the very being of the souls of Mexicans, whether they like it or not, whether they acknowledge it or not.
Thank you. There's a question about whether there are regional differences in how Day of the Dead is celebrated across Mexico.
Of course, definitely. In the more indigenous cultures, especially Michoacan, Oaxaca, you will often see the Day of the Dead celebrations lasting the entire month, and that they still observe the days that honor people who died of violent death, in childbirth, drowning, old age, for children. So you definitely see, more than anything, the amount of days that the celebration would last. And then, of course, also what you put on the altar as far as representing earth. You know, here I've seen many times nopal cactuses on altars. Well, further south, you know, they would have more tropical fruits and vegetables. So definitely every region still holds on to their indigenous rituals and differ from region to region. The one thing that's really in common in all of these, besides the skulls, is the vein of Catholicism also. Very excellent questions.
Just to add on to that, we spent Day of the Dead in Oaxaca City several years ago, and there was definitely, it was much more festive. They set up a big old, like almost a carnival outside of the cemeteries with food stalls and mechanical bulls and carnival rides. And it lasted, it was just much bigger, more festive
exactly
than it is here. I was surprised that here the cemeteries close early.
Exactly. Yes, and here also it is kind of this idea where, you know, we are remembering people who have died, but we're also realizing we too will die someday, and now is the time to enjoy life. So that's why you see things like carnivals and festivals and rides when you think it would be very somber, but no, you're celebrating your ancestors' lives, and it's the time to enjoy your life while you are alive. So I think they kind of go hand in hand. Yeah,
for sure. And on that topic, on the note, as foreigners here in Mexico, are there boundaries for what's appropriate for those of us if we want, you know, to what extent can we participate in these traditions even though they're not our own?
Oh, I think everyone is welcome to make their altars. I mean, everyone is going to honor their own family and friends in the way they see fit. Oftentimes in the American section of the cemeteries, which we have a few of, either, you know, Americans will go and decorate those graves, and if they've been neglected, the Mexicans will often come over and add flowers and decorate those abandoned graves also. I think really, you know, there's no overstepping boundaries here. I think, you know, people appreciate the fact that everyone in this world has lost a loved one. And I think the way that we see it here of telling stories and keeping memories alive is a much healthier way to see death. When I was teaching, I loved second grade. These second graders we'd do an altar in class, and they would tell me about their sometimes great grandmother, and they knew these people's favorite colors and pets, and you know, they put dancing shoes on the altar because their great-great-grandma went dancing with their great-great-grandpa every Sunday in the Jardín. And I did this project once in the United States, and I had a little girl about second grade also, when I said, we could honor your great-grandmother. Who's my great-grandmother? Well, your grandmother's mother. My grandma had a mom? Like, just, mind blown. And so I think, really this is what keeps the sense of family alive in Mexico. I'm the mother of a teenage boy, and I kept waiting for the embarrassed by my parents phase that American children go through to kick in, and it didn't. Part of it may be that he's a boy, but part of it is, the kids say, I saw you at the mall with your mom, and like, well, who else would I go to the mall with? Who else is going to buy me something at the mall? I mean, really none of that. And I think it goes back to learning past generations and appreciating the family. Definitely.
Definitely. We have a question from Christine Pope, who asks, what do you do with the food items that you put on the altar as an offering after Day of the Dead is finished? Do you throw it out, or do you eat it? Do you box it up for next year?
Well, the kids say, oh, I tasted some of the mole the next day, and it tasted like water. The dead, they come and they suck up all the flavor. So, I mean, I suppose you could feed it to your dog. They'll eat anything. They don't care about flavoring. But in general, it is not eaten. It is thrown away, or it is composted, or whatever. Yes, because it was for the dead, and they took the essence out of the food.
I had one comment. We were told the first year that we set up an altar, we put a picture of my mother-in-law, of us with my mother-in-law, and we were very adamantly corrected that you don't put pictures of living people on the altar. So only the picture of the deceased person goes on there.
Usually that's true, although of course there are cases where you don't have a photo without somebody else in it. And, I feel, of course, a little bit looser, but, I feel if you have to choose between putting a photo of somebody that has a living person in it or not putting a photo of that person, it would be preferable to put the photo of that person. But definitely, we spend before Day of the Dead going through pictures and, scanning them in and cropping people out. And, some people go as far as doing Photoshop to get the picture of the deceased one alone. But, I think in Mexico, we have a saying that's ni muy ni tan, which basically means, not too much one way, not too much the other, finding kind of that happy medium between, the history and the traditions and what we can do today in modern times.
So I don't think that there are any more questions unless anybody has any last minute questions. In the meantime, we've gotten lots of thanks. MJ Williams says, thanks, Vail. Tracy says, thank you, Vail. This is wonderfully informative and entertaining. Paula says, thank you, great fun. Christine Love says, that's lovely, very enjoyable. If any to donate, we put the link in the chat presentation. In the chat box, languageadventurepros.com, go to our webinars page, and you could see this. After tomorrow, we will be, right now we're recording this presentation, and if you want to share it with anybody, you can go to our website and it will be on there, and you can continue to donate to Vail, whose time we really, really appreciate. If there's anything else that you want to say or add?
Thank you so much.
This is
Sorry.
I had one question that I think came up was about, so the November 1st is for children, and then the November 2nd was for everybody else, or how does the aging work?
Oftentimes they divide it by if you were married or not, if you had children. if you had children, I suppose now, regardless if you were married, if you had children, you would then go to November 2nd as an ancestor, whereas the Angelitos, or the little angels, often would be anyone who was unmarried, and often would include priests and nuns also. Even, older men or women that never had children and were never married. If you got married, then even if you didn't have kids, if you were married, you made it to adulthood, you would be celebrated on November 2nd.
Thank you for that clarification.
What about the flip side of that? Miscarriages, babies not yet born or named, do they go on the altars?
They can go on the altars, and of course the Catholic Church has a whole set of rituals to baptize miscarriages or stillborn babies. So they can get their name and they can get their baptism, so they won't be stuck in purgatory forever. And definitely they are honored. You'll often see, baby bottles, baby blankets, things like that. And those would either be infants who died, or of course, miscarriages also. Yes, excellent questions. Wow, very good. Oh, I'm seeing a question, the significance of the pigs and the sheep. That's just a sign of abundance. The chickens, the sheep, the pigs, that we have a lot to give to these people to honor them. Also, very good questions. Very good. Excellent. Any other questions from anyone?
We just have a comment. A lot of the questions came from one person, Ann Nikolai, who recently lost somebody in the automobile accident. That was.
Oh no.
And she says, thank you so much. She really needed this information from you. So thank you so much.
Oh. Well, I'm so sorry for your loss. This year, 2020, we have about 7 people that we are putting on the altar. And I have the very terrible, I have to do an altar or an ofrenda for one of my very first students that I ever had here, 25, just finished medical school. And so this is the one I'm struggling with the most, although the rest, of course, were near and dear to our hearts. When you compare 25 years of life compared to 70 or 80 or 85 years of life, it's just hits much harder. So yes, I think we're gonna have to do our altar outside in the patio, because it's going to have to be humongous this year. So, well, I'm glad that I could give some help and some comfort to someone, especially here in town. So, yes, always, it's a double-edged sword. Mexicans, you'll see skeletons in artwork, in handicrafts, put up in homes year round. And the idea is what I mentioned before, that, you're alive now and you have to enjoy your life while you're alive. And they're often kind of skeletons in humorous situations. And it's kind of poking fun at death, because it's something like being born and dying, you have no control over, and it happens to all of us. So you might as well, open it, welcome it with open arms to an extent, and not live in fear, day to day, and remember to enjoy our lives.
Exactly.
Thank you, Vail. And thank you for putting together that wonderful guide that we can print out and use to do all the elements of the ofrenda. And I do hope that people will send us photos of your ofrendas, and I'll put the email.
Oh, fabulous. Yes, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I would too.
So
Very.
everybody, Vail, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and your experience with us. Thank you everybody for coming, for participating. If you haven't had a chance to donate, it's on our website, languageadventurepros.com. If you want to email us your pictures of your ofrendas, you can email us at languageadventurepros@gmail.com. And thank you so much for those of you who have been with us since the beginning with these webinars. Thank you so much, and keep an eye on our website for whatever we have cooked up next. So thank you everybody, and have a good night.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you everyone for coming. Have a good evening, and send us those pictures of the ofrendas.